Welcome to the Infowars Nightly News. It is Tuesday, March 11th, 2014, and I'm Leanne McAdoo. Well, armed Texans are going to be taking to South by Southwest tomorrow at high noon. Why? Because we don't take too kindly to people attacking our civil liberties here in Texas, and especially not if those trendies over at South by Southwest are trying to push it at one of their panels. These are the same people that try to tell us we couldn't have our First Amendment right to pass out magazines last year. And now, this past weekend, key leaders of gun control groups led by former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg held a panel discussion in which they bragged about their takeover of Facebook and their success at restricting pro-gun speech on this social media site. Now, in response to their anti-gun movement that's been promoted by South by Southwest, it's an internationally known music, interactive, and film festival, but it's now apparently hosting political events. Well, the Austin chapter of Come and Take It Texas will hold an open carry march through the streets of South by Southwest. It's going to be starting from the corner of 12th and San Jacinto. Due to very heavy traffic, road closures for South by Southwest, please plan on arriving early. Give yourself ample time to reach the event. The coordinator there is going to have some safety rules and regulations. Myself and Jakari Jackson, we will be there marching live for the Alex Jones Show, reporting with the Come and Take It Texas group and everyone else that's going to join us out there. High noon. Be sure to get there early. Mainly, we're going to be out there pushing back against this attack on the Second Amendment, but also just to show people, the brainwashed masses that are out there, that guns do not equate to violence. And that's really the group that we're trying to show we're the good guys. We're the ones that are marching out here for your rights. Don't be brainwashed by the matrix immersed trendies there at South by Southwest. And Holder has made no bones about it. That is exactly their plan, to brainwash the masses into making guns obsolete.
Part of every day, some kind of anti-violence, anti-gun message. Every day, every school, at every level. One thing that I think is clear with young people and with adults as well is that we just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on a Monday and then only do it every Monday. We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
Brainwashing the public. That is exactly what they're trying to do. Just be repetitive with this brainwashing and push their agenda. And one of the ways they're going to be doing this is via your doctor. You know, the doctor that you couldn't keep, maybe the new one that Obamacare has just put into your life. Well, now, so much for patient-doctor confidentiality. Dr. Vivek Murthy, who is, of course, Obama's pick to be America's next Surgeon General. He is a rabid anti-Second Amendment ideologue who believes firearms ownership is a public health issue. Now, Murthy is the president and co-founder of Doctors for America, which is an organization that has pushed for stronger gun laws. Now, according to this organization, firearms are a plague threatening society, and it calls for doctors to interrogate patients, including minors, about guns in the home. If the patient admits a family member exercises his or her constitutional right to own firearms, the organization wants to counsel them appropriately about safety measures. And I am just curious what that counseling is going to equate to. Now, during hearings in February before the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, Senator Lamar Alexander grilled Dr. Murthy on his public comments regarding firearms. He said, "Americans have a First Amendment right to advocate the Second Amendment, and the Second Amendment is not a special interest group. It's a part of our Constitution. If your goal is to make guns the bully pulpit of your advocacy in this Surgeon General's office, that would concern me." And that concerns me also, and it should concern all of you. And that's why we want to make sure that you join us tomorrow, exercise your First Amendment for the Second Amendment. It is high time that these people who take an oath to uphold the Constitution learn what it means, especially the shall not be infringed portion of the Second Amendment, and really learn why these amendments are in the Constitution in the first place. But this year, South by Southwest has not only been pushing political ideology, they've also really been pushing the future of technology, just really in your face, Google glasses everywhere, virtual reality displays. There are wearable clothing that are showing you how neat it'll be someday when your tracksuit reminds you when to eat and drink and don't eat that sandwich because you're actually obese. I actually ran into a roving robot girl named Brianna today as well. We'll have that report coming up tomorrow. But what we also saw was the future of drone warfare. This time it's an Austin-based tech firm. They took South by Southwest by surprise this past weekend by unveiling what it believes is the future of security technology. An unmanned aerial vehicle that's capable of deploying taser nodes and dishing out 80,000 electrifying volts. It's being billed as personal security, and it fires on human targets that are deemed threats. Now, the test run went off without a hitch. They made a poor guinea pig intern take this taser hit. He turned to run away from the drone only to collapse onto a collection of mats after he was stung with 80 kilowatts of intense voltage. Now, in a press release, the Chaotic Moons Studios, who has created this drone, says, the drone can be deployed when an alarm is triggered. It can find a subject and send live video to the owner's phone and ask you if you want to authorize the subject or detain them. If you detain them, it drops into fully autonomous mode to detain them until police arrive, and if need be, stunning them with 80,000 volts of electricity to render them incapacitated. So while they are selling this as a novel security gadget, in reality, it is just bringing forward these autonomous drones that are going to be weaponized and making these decisions for themselves, deeming something a threat or not. And they will be fully devoid of accountability. We've already seen the mistakes that drones can make when men are behind them controlling them and they accidentally demolish a wedding party in Pakistan or something. So now we have people with their apps on their phones, which will be controlling drones with tasers connected to them. But I guarantee you and I won't be allowed to have those. It'll only be people like Bloomberg, who he's only allowed to have the guns because he's very, very, very rich and important. Now, meanwhile, there are real terrorists out there who aren't trying to stop these weaponized drones from coming into play. No, they are trying to ban you and I from using the word bossy. That's right. There's a new campaign that rather than just encourage women to be leaders, they are nanny stating it by banning the word bossy. Hashtag ban bossy. Now, I will be the first to say I am a self-made woman. I am all for empowering women to be leaders, be go-getters, but this is a very 1984-esque way of going about it. By banning the word bossy, it's just reinforcing the notion that this oppression comes from within the culture and within language and not by the state and by the elites. They are now absolving the state from any wrongdoing, from being the source of this oppression. And as Paul Joseph Watson points out in this article, they use feminism to crush freedom and free speech in the name of protecting women's rights. But these campaigns are never grassroots. They're backed by transnational corporations and banks. GM, Google, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, Booz Allen Hamilton, oil companies like Chevron, and of course Sony, who pushes a vast majority of music with derogatory themes for women. So of course that's a great place we could start. And of course at the head of these transnational companies, how many women do they have leading these companies exactly? I mean, that's the point. If you want to really help women become leaders, start there. It's not by banning words. Now, feminism, the way they are using it is a top-down tool for the establishment to promote cultural Marxism, to create thought criminals, and to police language. So don't be fooled by the latest campaign. Find out, follow the money, as they say, and that's who's backing this campaign. Now, stick around because we have a very important interview coming up with Ben Swann.
globalist social engineers are not just targeting us with propaganda. They are manipulating our genetics. We are being targeted at every level by estrogen mimickers that lower our testosterone and other hormones and natural compounds that the body needs. After consulting top doctors, nutritionists, pharmacists, and others, we have developed what I believe is the ultimate non-GMO organic super male vitality formula sourced from powerful organic herbs and then concentrated for maximum potency. Super male vitality was developed to activate your body's own natural processes instead of using synthetic chemicals. Super male vitality by Infowars Life is so powerful that I only take half the recommended dose. For a limited time, we are offering 15% off Super Male Vitality at InfoWarsLife.com to introduce you to this powerful supplement. Visit InfoWarsLife.com today to secure your Super Male Vitality. InfoWarsLife.com.
We're on the march. The empire's on the run. And the Infowars army is standing strong. Wake up your family, friends, and neighbors and break the matrix at InfoWarsStore.com. Learn the truth and spread the message of liberty with the world's most comprehensive collection of books and documentary films. Maintain a healthy metabolism and energize your body to perform at peak health with Survival Shield Nascent Iodine. Protect your family and be prepared with survival foods and emergency preparedness kits. And now you can drink safe water with your own ProPure water filtration system, which removes fluoride and other harmful chemicals from your family's water supply. Save 10% with the promo code WATER. So join the revolution. InfoWarsStore.com.
Well, joining us tonight is someone I'm sure you know, Ben Swann. He's got 14 years as a journalist. He's won 2 Edward R. Murrow Awards, 2 Emmys, and over the period of time, he has come to realize the importance of being independent from corporate control. And so he started benswann.com, and we're going to be talking to him tonight about another new project. It's nice to meet you, Ben.
Thank you so much.
I first found you on the internet when the 2012 elections were going, and you were doing excellent coverage on the primaries especially.
Thank you.
The shenanigans that were being played out there. Now, tell us about this new lawsuit.
Yeah, so over at benswann.com, we have a brand new episode, Truth in Media, called In Partisanship. And what we're doing with that is we're talking about a brand new lawsuit that was just filed yesterday. That lawsuit essentially says that the Republican and Democratic parties have a hold on the election system, the electoral process, that is completely unacceptable. Essentially, in most states in the country, they have closed primaries, which means unless you're registered as a Republican or a Democrat, you cannot vote in those primaries. However, taxpayers as a whole are paying about $400 million a year to pay for those private primaries. Now, the other important issue here is that about 48% of the entire country right now, so nearly half of it, is no longer affiliated with the Republican or Democratic Party. Now, if you watch any national media, you're going to think that the country is divided in two. It's Republicans and Democrats, right? Those are the only two parties, and that's what everyone is made up of. But it's not true. About half the country is not affiliated with either party, which means half the population cannot vote in a primary that will decide ultimately the at-large seat, and yet has to pay for it to the tune of $400 million. That's what the lawsuit is about. It's been filed in New Jersey as the kind of the test case where they're moving it forward there. It's going to go out across the rest of the country as well.
Talk about the caucuses, because that was one of the places where it seemed like that was where we saw the most fluidity in the movement, where you could have a candidate like Ron Paul get traction, and where I think really you saw the accurate reflection of his popularity and amongst the populace there. But they played a lot of shenanigans, in the caucuses. You covered that extensively. What do you think is going to happen? They're moving to change that process. Now, have you been tracking that?
Yeah, they've already changed some of it. So the RNC recently had their Rules Committee hearing, and they went into that meeting and they changed some of the rules, basically saying that states have to bind their delegates, okay, to the overall at-large winner. Because what they don't want is this embarrassment of having folks who go into these caucuses and they become delegates, and then those delegates are free to vote however they choose to vote. Which, if you really get down into a democratic republic, right, where we have representative democracy, that is actually the best system because you have the most informed people who are engaged. They are elected because I know you, right? So if I live in your county and we're neighbors and I say, you're the one who can go and represent me, I'm going to trust your judgment. You get to go to a convention, you get to see all the different candidates and say, I think this one best represents not just me, but my constituency.
Because you're following that. You're the guy you delegate somebody to be your representative. That person is really going to cover it closely because you don't all have the time to do that.
That's
you
right.
don't have the time to look at all those nuances, and that's the way the political conventions used to be.
Well, that's
you used
right.
to go to these political conventions, and they would have it up for grabs, and people are meeting each other. Now, of course, they're cutting some backroom deals. They say we want to get rid of the smoke-filled rooms, but still, now what you're having is a very shallow discussion, and people getting elected that nobody knows. And if you can get your neighbor elected, that's a very different thing than having a smoke-filled room with a bunch of professional politicians.
And keep in mind too that the conventions didn't used to be coronations. The conventions were set up so that candidates would actually go there and make their case as to why they should be the candidate. But we don't want that anymore because it's a top-down approach, right? The Republican Party, the Democratic parties are top-down approaches. The party bosses ultimately decide who gets to have, be the representative of the party, and they're going to base it on a few factors. Basically who's going to tote the party line the best, who's going to have the most connections to special interest groups, who the lobbyists like, right? That guy's going to get in. And that's what it really comes down to. So one thing that's very important in this process is people will say when they hear about this in-partisanship lawsuit is they'll say, well, listen, if you open up the primaries, then you're going to have Democrats who are going in there and voting for the Republican candidate because they're trying to cause problems and keep the best Republican candidate from winning. That's not true. It's simply not true. That may happen to some extent where some Democrats choose to go do that. But if that is beginning to happen, I think people are savvy enough to see it and say, well, we don't want that person. We're going to actually show up and vote. Keep in mind, in primaries right now, only about 9% of the population votes in primaries. 9%. So we're talking about 91% of the people don't even vote at all in a primary. So don't tell me that right now we have a good system where the best people are getting in because it's pure and keeping the party pure.
Let's talk about the debates. Because I was involved with the Libertarian Party 20 years ago. I've seen a lot of changes. We're winning the information war. We've now got Ted Cruz talking about abolishing the income tax. We see drug prohibition, the drug war. People are waking up to the evils of that, what it's done to our legal system, that it's not working, just like alcohol prohibition didn't work. So we see a lot of change in the populace. We see some real changes coming. And yet we still have situations where they put onerous ballot access controls on for third parties, or they keep major candidates like we have Ron Paul kept out of the debates, or Gary Johnson, a two-term governor, kept out of the debates. I mean, how do we open up this process to make it?
Well, when we're talking about presidential debates, it's important to remember that the presidential debates are put on by the Commission for Presidential Debates, which at face value sounds, oh, that sounds good. But then when you actually find out what it is, it's a representative from the Republican Party and Democratic Party who ultimately decide who gets to be in the debates. Well, that's a terrible system, right? The League of Women Voters actually quit being involved in the debates in 1984 because they said the two parties are trying to block everyone else from being a part of the system. And that's why they actually quit putting on those debates. They had actually sponsored every televised presidential debate prior to 1984. So where we are right now is we have a system where I think we're going to have to see some lawsuits. I know that Gary Johnson was part of a lawsuit in 2012 in order to try to force his way into debates. It wasn't even heard. It still hasn't been heard, right? So I talked to him actually recently and asked about the status of that, what's happening with the lawsuit. He says they're still waiting to find out what's going to happen. But no one's eager to take on this issue. I think as we see new media continue to explode, I think as we see the continued growth of the Libertarian Party around the country, the idea of independence continuing to grow. I mean, half the nation, as I mentioned, are no longer affiliated with Republicans and Democrats. And I think I'm involved in a process called Open Debates 2016, where we're working very hard to try to create an alternative debate to the Commission on Presidential Debates. But what I would really like to see is, include any candidate who has ballot access enough to win the Electoral College. If you can do that, you should be allowed in the debates. I think that's a very reasonable thing, and I think that a lawsuit should be able to make that happen. I would hope that it would be heard. I would hope that that would take place. I believe this. If you would put Gary Johnson in the debate in 2012, I don't know if he would have won the White House, but I believe it would have had a significant effect in the numbers that went to the Libertarian Party.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I think we're having a lot of victories here. You're having a lot of victories. You're reaching a lot of people. We're reaching a lot of people. the control point that we've been talking about is the elections, but there's another control point, and that's the internet. And when you were talking to Alex Jones, you talked about how it's the Gutenberg press of the 21st century.
That's right.
But how do we keep that press free? Because we see with the things that are happening in the FCC, it wasn't just this survey where they went around and said they were going to look at the content development within different newsrooms. That was pretty scary because they're no longer just looking at refereeing the distribution. Now they're looking at carefully at the content and even going to newsrooms. But then they kind of step back from that. But then we've had this recent court decision about net neutrality, which reinforced the idea that the FCC could police the internet and make policies about the internet. The FCC just kind of came out there about the internet with this net neutrality out of nowhere and said, we have authority over that based on a 1996 Telecommunications Act. I mean, the internet wasn't really around in 1996 except in a bare bones existence. So that clearly wasn't the intent of that. But now the court has sided with them. Do you think they're going to use that now? They got a court decision. Are they going to use that to come after and do CISPA, SOPA, PIPTA, ACTA, one of these things by fiat, or what do you think?
I absolutely. I think they will, because the goal has been, we want CISPA and SOPA and PIPA. We want these intellectual property bills, right? That will ultimately mean a better internet for everyone. It'll mean a safer internet. It will mean that people's intellectual property is protected. That's what we're told. And so, will they be able to do that by fiat, by simply saying we're going to regulate it? Absolutely. And I think that's coming. Remember that there is enormous amounts of money coming from lobbying firms, coming from News Corp, coming from Time Warner, coming from Verizon, who spent huge amounts of lobbying money trying to get CISPA and SOPA and PIPA pushed through. When there is that much money pushing for it, ultimately it's going to happen in some way or another, because you're essentially buying that regulation, and that's what's been happening.
And now you've got Comcast and Time are going to merge into this gigantic number one and number two.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about that is I did a piece about that recently, and some people were critical of it because I pointed out that under FCC rules, in order for them to be able to have this merger, they need to be able to demonstrate that it's in the public interest, right? That the merger is necessary in order to help consumers. Of course it's not. Comcast is the most expensive form of cable there is out there, highest prices and terrible service, and there's no reason why they need to combine with Time Warner. What a lot of people don't know about Comcast and Time Warner, though, is that forget about the fact that they control so much of the cable space. If you go to cable channels, okay, cable channels are not just random channels. Comcast owns about 60 to 70% of all the channels that are on cable, regardless of the carrier. Time Warner owns another 20 to 25% of them. So the vast majority of channels that are on cable and on dish, on satellite, whatever it is, are already owned by Comcast and Time Warner, which means you're also consolidating all of those channels into just one company. And now think about this. If I
as well as Hollywood studios too. I mean,
that's right.
The media empire is just amazing. So you've got not only the pipeline, but the content generation is all being consolidated into one entity. Company. Yeah,
that's right. Now think about this for a minute. So you've got a guy like for instance Glenn Beck, right, who has the Blaze, and some people like him, some people don't like him. But Glenn is trying to get the Blaze onto cable carriers. He can't get it on. The reason he can't get it on is because a lot of folks assume if you have enough money, you should be able to get it there. Well, that's not true. That's right. So when you have other folks who have, there's these guys who have a network called One America trying to get carriage. They can't get picked up by anyone because the cable companies are also protecting against competition for their cable channels.
Yes.
You can consolidating all of that into one entity. It's a very scary thing. The other point, though, about net neutrality, the worst possible conclusion came out of that court's decision. Yes. The court ultimately decided that net neutrality did not need to exist, right? That companies like Verizon and Comcast, they don't have to allow people to access your website. So for guys like, benswann.com, for Infowars.com, if some politician says to them, hey, listen, we cut this deal for you, now make sure people aren't seeing this stuff. Yeah. They're saying legally you have the right to prevent that. But the court, so that was the first bad part. And then the second part of it was, but the FCC also does have the ability to be involved. The absolute worst two outcomes came out of that court decision.
Because what you can have is a situation, what we were concerned about with CISPA, SOPA, ACTA, PIPA, all these different things. So they can just make an accusation that you have a copyright violation and shut you down before you have your day in court, before you have due process. It's just like the NDAA, but for free speech. Absolutely. For media organizations instead of individuals. And we've seen that happen over and over again. We've seen it with the war on drugs, where they seize everybody's property without even charging you. Or maybe they charge the inanimate object with a crime,
right.
and they don't even charge you, but they keep the property. This is what's really concerning, is to see that they could do this now with the media, just shut down entire organizations just like that.
Well, and it always comes back to trying to protect the greater good, right? So we're trying to protect people. In this case, it's intellectual property owners and creators have to be protected from all these rogue websites that might steal their content. You know, we did a piece, a Truth and Media piece, about a guy who had a T-shirt that had a logo on it that's the NSA, it's peeping while you're sleeping, the only part of the government that listens.
Dan McCall.
Dan McCall, that's right. Interviewed this guy, and he had these T-shirts made, and the NSA simply went in and said that he was infringing on their intellectual property and got it pulled from all these marketplaces across the country. By the way, an update to that story, I talked to Dan McCall recently. He's now won his lawsuit because the NSA backed down instead of letting it get to court, because they were headed to court. NSA and DHS have both been pulling this on him. They both backed down. Not only did they do that, but they both issued letters saying that he was in the right and they were wrong to have had his stuff pulled down.
Well, of course, because they don't copyright anything. I mean, we could go to if the government creates content, it's not copyrighted. It belongs to the people that pay for the government.
Well, and even a step further than that, even if they did own the content and it were copyrighted, the bottom line is parody is an acceptable form of fair use. That's right. And the Supreme Court's already ruled on this, so they had absolutely no leg to stand on. But the point is, they didn't need a leg to stand on.
That's right.
To be able to come in and say, hey, no, you can't have it. We're going to create problems for Zazzle or .com. Zazzle's going to say, no, I'm not going to deal with the Fed. So we're just going to pull your stuff down.
I've seen this over and over again, where they come in and they just bully people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the TSA is all about.
Absolutely.
And the TSA did that to John Corbett. He wouldn't be bullied. He sued them a couple of times. He did a video showing how if you put a weapon on the side, the naked body scanners couldn't see it. He's got a lawsuit going against him now. So what they did was they sent him a thing and said, that's all right, here's your get out of jail free pass. You can just go right through security from here on out. Yeah. And they did the same thing with a farmer in Michigan, where the agricultural department in Michigan came in and declared his breed of pigs to be invasive species and feral. He fought them for 3 years, and finally they just said, okay, yours are okay, but we're not going to change the rule for other farmers.
That's right. See? Because you're creating problems for us.
Yes.
Right?
We just give you a pass.
But what they don't want is, and the reason you get a pass is because they do not want it to ultimately reach a court decision. They don't want precedent.
That's right.
As soon as the precedent happens, then they lose power. Now, I think we're almost optimistic to think there would be precedent in that regard, because how often does a federal judge actually rule against the feds? I mean, it very rarely happens. They typically expand federal power, and so that's a whole other show, right? But I think there is a major issue here when it comes to the fact that government does not want these things in court. They do not want court decisions on them because they are afraid, knowing that exactly what you said. They're just running over people.
And they're bluffing people. So how do we get Ben Swann? How do we get people to not just one isolated farmer or one person at the TSA or one person with a T-shirt business? How do we get everybody to stand up and say, you're not doing that to us?
Well, I think that's a $64,000 question, right?
That's right.
And I think it's
that's what we're
tough.
both trying to do, right?
That's right. I think it's tough, and I'm not sure that it's going to happen soon. Look, I think it's little battles. You win little battles along the way if you plan to win the war. And too often, I think people, especially in the liberty movement, are waiting for a silver bullet. They're waiting for some moment that's going to cause this whole house of cards to fall down. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't. You know, G. Edward Griffin said something to me one time. He said, it took us 100 years to get to this point. 100 years for progressives, regardless of which party they're in, for the progressives in society to dismantle constitutional freedom. He says, and people want to put it back in 2 or 3. And it doesn't work that way. It's a process. So here's what I'm hopeful for, is that as we continue to expose these things, that my children, when they become adults, live in a freer nation than I do today, and that their children live in a freer nation than they live in. And I think if we can be progressively, because I guess we're the liberty progressives, right? We're progressing liberty. As we move forward in liberty, as we move forward in these ideas that are actually old ideas of individual freedom and prosperity, that generationally, we will see a shift take place. And I think we have to take a page out of what the progressive movement did over the last 100 years. Very patient, took their time, dismantled one thing at a time in one area at a time.
And they seized the moral high ground with semantics,
absolutely,
like claiming the name of liberal and progressive and that sort of thing when they weren't.
But they took a specific approach to education. They took a specific approach to media. They took a specific approach to politics and government. And I think that's what we're lacking. I think that we need, within the liberty movement, a much clearer strategy for how are we dealing with education? How are we dealing with media? How are we dealing with politics? How are we taking all these areas of business and finance and bring them all together and say, here is our strategy. We need that same kind of mentality that puts it out on paper and says, this is what we want to do.
And it's more difficult for us because I heard G. Edward Griffin say, we need to work collectively for individual liberty.
Yeah.
And that's a hard mindset because we're all these individualists. We want to go our own way and we don't think collectively. That's where they've got the advantage over us because they always think as a group and they always
because
work
it's a top-down approach,
exactly,
right? Somebody says, here's the plan, now everybody go out and execute it. And I think that for the purposes that we're talking about, because if we are to work that way together, does not require that we give up individual liberty in our own lives to also have a strategy that works collectively. I think we can be collectively strategic without being giving up our rights as individuals.
Exactly. I think so too. Well, it's great talking to you.
Likewise.
Really
Thanks so much for having me on.
And
you
good
guys
luck
are doing
to you.
Great work here.
Thank you. So you're doing excellent work as well, and we look forward to seeing what's going to come out of it.
Thanks so much.
This lawsuit. Thank you. We hope that you'll support his effort. That's inpartisanship.org, and of course his website is benswann.com. It's important for you to support truly independent media like Ben and like Infowars. One of the ways that you can support us is by becoming a subscriber to Prison Planet TV. With just one subscription, you'll pay for the bandwidth and you'll also be able to share this with 10 other people simultaneously. It's a great way to get the information out there. You can get all of our documentaries as well as all of our past news reports and get the nightly news as it's being broadcast. Well, that's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
The facts are in. The studies are legion. Sodium fluoride and other toxic members of the fluoride family are devastating the health and cognitive ability of the American people. So why are the social engineers adding it to the water? Simple. Dumb down the host population that the parasitic technocracy is feeding on. We may not have been able to get fluoride out of the water supply yet, but we can help to get it out of our bodies. I am extremely excited to announce the exclusive Infowars Life Fluoride Shield formulation, fusing 6 of the best documented ingredients from around the world to help the body remove not just toxic fluoride residues from the body, but a whole host of toxic substances. Let's take a stand against the globalist by blocking their poisons with Fluoride Shield. I use Fluoride Shield every day. Secure your Fluoride Shield and other pioneering formulations at InfoWarsLife.com today. Let's start cleansing our bodies now and support the Info War at the same time. That's InfoWarsLife.com.
You are watching the Infowars Nightly News, which airs 7 p.m. Central at InfoWarsNews.com. Members can share their passcodes with up to 11 other people, and your support is helping us defend liberty worldwide. South by Southwest, the international festival showcasing advances in technology and new talent, is dragging us backwards in the ways of our civil liberties by promoting the likes of Michael Bloomberg and his Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and also Shannon Watts, the former Monsanto executive, and her Moms Demand Action. Both groups were on hand the opening weekend of the festival to push their anti-gun agenda. During the event, the speakers boasted about their ability to take over sites such as Facebook, their success in placing gun chatter in the same category as porn. And as people have pointed out in the past, sometimes your presence on social media is more important to your campaign than how much money you can raise. And while some may attack our rights from the shadows, we exercise our rights in broad daylight. That's why this Wednesday, March 12th, armed activists will be marching through South by Southwest in defense of our civil liberties. And will be broadcast live on the Alex Jones radio show at 12 p.m. Central, and will set the stage for an even larger open carry event March 15th, that's a Saturday, where liberty-loving people will gather together to peacefully show their Second Amendment rights to an international community. Join us this Wednesday and Saturday at locations to be announced soon as we continue to bring the message of liberty and freedom to downtown Austin, Texas.
We're not turning our guns in, and we're not running, and we're not backing down. If you want them, come and take them.
All right, so let's talk about avoiding these incognito toxic substances that are hiding in the food supply that go beyond GMOs and even some of the stuff that most of us are aware of.
My health secret number 3 is to eat clean foods. I mean, we've gone down the track of health over the last 20 or 30 years, and it's because our food supply has been contaminated. It's been heavily sprayed with pesticides and insecticide residue. It's been out-farmed. The soils haven't been changed, which means we have the mineral and the vitamin content of our foods that's been depleted. We have processed canned foods. We have microwaved foods. When you look at the toxic buildup of foods, and in the food supply today, with all the hormones being injected into meat and with the genetically modified foods, especially corn and soy, we have the majority of foods out there that are actually going to cause or initiate some form of disease inside the body. So the first thing that I recommend, I mean, if you look at the majority of the toxins that are coming into the human body, they're all going to come in through the mouth. And how they get in the system is they're going to come in through your intestinal lining. And that's another reason we have so many intestinal issues these days. Colon cancer, stomach problems, irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis. That just tells you right there that we have serious situations with the food. And that just tells you that the food is contaminated. The secret to that, the best thing that everybody can do is immediately switch over to organically certified foods. You know, that's going to prevent the majority of the toxins that you're exposed to on a daily basis through food from actually coming in and damaging your system. And organic foods are not going to contain genetically modified ingredients, which is the Bt toxin, is the most damaging thing because it actually burns holes through the intestinal lining. When you have holes burned in the intestinal lining, you're going to be more susceptible to immune response, you're going to be more susceptible to disease because you have these broken down particles that aren't fully broken down that are floating around inside your bloodstream and that are leaking through. So eat organic is the number 1 rule. Number 2, eat as many live foods as you possibly can. Eat more fruits, eat more vegetables. Live foods equals life. Dead foods equal death. It's that simple. Another thing I recommend to people is to get rid of the microwave. Most of the food is stored and cooked in a microwave, is in plastic containers. Then you have the toxins coming out of the plastic into the food. Do not cook your food in aluminum cookware, which contaminates it with high levels of aluminum. Don't cook your food in Teflon-coated cookware. You know, that's another contaminant that gets into the food supply. You know, gluten also. You know, what you want to do is you want to avoid table salt. Look at the toxic ingredients that are found in all the foods. Replace the toxic ingredients with non-toxic ingredients. Use Himalayan crystal salt. Get away from the white flour, which has bromine in it, and that causes an iodine deficiency in the body.
That used to use iodine, but now it uses bromine.
Exactly. Look for natural, organic alternatives that have not been manipulated by man, that have not been modified by man in some way, shape, or form, and get back to a more natural diet. For example, gluten itself is a toxin to the body. You know, you can slowly make changes in your dietary habits and start with organic and then start looking and reading, learning how to read the ingredients, and then going from fully organic to slowly eliminating or replacing the things that you normally use with organic or healthier options.
The globalist social engineers are not just targeting us with propaganda. They are manipulating our genetics. We are being targeted at every level by estrogen mimickers that lower our testosterone and other hormones and natural compounds that the body needs. After consulting top doctors, nutritionists, pharmacists, and others, we have developed what I believe is the ultimate non-GMO organic super male vitality formula sourced from powerful organic herbs and then concentrated for maximum potency. Super Male Vitality was developed to activate your body's own natural processes instead of using synthetic chemicals. dose. Super Male Vitality by Infowars Life is so powerful that I only take half the recommended dose. For a limited time, we are offering 15% off Super Male Vitality at InfoWarsLife.com to introduce you to this powerful supplement. Visit InfoWarsLife.com today to secure your Super Male Vitality. InfoWarsLife.com.